Welcome to the 30 After. I'm your host, Joshua Short, and today we're going to have this extra speaking about horror movies and scary movies from the 20s all the way till now. Right now I'm with Jacob Knuth, who is a cinema arts major here at Columbia College Chicago. Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Let's talk about these different subtexts in different films since the 20s in horror films. You mentioned the gay subtext. Let's start talking about the gay subtext and how that's translated today.
Okay. Well, my area of expertise is like the Universal monster movies, which are the Dracula, the Frankenstein movies that Universal released between like the 30s and 50s. And three of their best films, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, and The Bride of Frankenstein, were directed by an openly gay man in 1930s Hollywood.
Really?
Yeah, James Whale, great guy. There's a biopic about him called Gods and Monsters with Ian McKellen. But in Bride of Frankenstein specifically, there is a ton of gay subtext. Excuse me. And
It gets to me too sometimes, don't worry about it.
and a friend of his did deny this being intentional in the film, but when you watch the film, it's hard to ignore it because there are really two examples of kind of representations of homosexuality in the film. There's Dr. Pretorius.
Okay.
Dr. Pretorius is a character introduced in this film who is an antagonist who is a former mentor of Dr. Frankenstein. And a gay historian, I forget who, said that he was a sissified character, sissy being the term for homosexuality in the 30s. And he pulls Dr. Frankenstein from his bed on his wedding night to literally for the purpose of unnatural life by like making dead monsters and stuff like that. So that's kind of a representation of how the people of the time feared homosexuality, and it's kind of this dark thing.
Did that set a standard to how we view sexuality now, homosexuality now in today's time?
I don't know that it set a standard, but I think it enforced the standard.
Gotcha.
But then on the flip side of that, you have the Frankenstein monster.
Gotcha.
Who, I don't know if you could call him gay, but he's definitely part of the LGBTQIA category, because the Frankenstein monster views the most important relationship to him is friendship. He doesn't refer to the bride as wife or love or girlfriend. Sex is not on his mind. He just wants a friend.
Gotcha.
So in the middle of the film, he comes across this blind man in a cabin. And the blind man doesn't react to him with fear, and he like teaches him to speak, and he teaches him what's good and bad and how to smoke and all this stuff. And that relationship to him is equally important as the relationship he hopes to have with the bride at the end of the film. It doesn't occur to him that the relationship with the woman is the preferred one. And going a step further, the relationship with the blind man ends when these villagers who are looking for the Frankenstein monster come to the blind man's cabin, and they see the monster and the blind man being friends, and they immediately reject it.
Wow.
They immediately reject that kind of relationship, and they shun the monster and they push him away because it's unnatural.
So that's just the gay subtext.
Yes.
But there's tons of different subtexts here. You got feminism.
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
The feminism in the monster movies, it was the 1930s and 50s. I could spend an hour talking about bad sexism.
Let's do it. Let's do a whole hour. Let's do it.
It's a lot easier to talk about the surprisingly good examples in the film.
Sure.
Specifically in the films towards the end of the cycle, because when the monster movies were declining in popularity, they threw comedians Abbott and Costello in there.
Okay.
And so in Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man, there was this running idea that the character played by Abbott, who's the skinnier of the two, like the straight man, he would objectify a woman. He would be like, oh, bring me that dish over there, like he's at a restaurant or something. Yes. And then immediately the woman would turn out to be the most competent character in the film, one of the most intelligent characters in the film, and she would just manipulate the two for her own means, because they're both idiots in these movies. So that's a good example of feminism in those films. But kind of the reverse of that is everyone talks about how there aren't that many female superheroes.
Yes.
There aren't that many female monsters. There's the Bride of Frankenstein, who is the only one of like the big eight to never kill anybody. Dracula's daughter is probably the best female universal monster. And then you have the Invisible Woman.
And why do you think that is? Why not too many female monsters? Why is that?
I think it's just because of the mind period of the era, and kind of this weird belief that persists now is that people won't see a movie with a female as a lead unless it's like a chick flick or something like that. Like horror movies typically pander to men, especially in the 30s.
Yes.
So they want to see men being men and like women being victims, and a monster in the film is a role of power.
Gotcha.
So to kind of have that would go against that idea.
Racism. Let's talk about it. Racism. You said this has happened since racism or slavery was abolished. You've seen racism recur in different movies and horror films especially.
Yeah, so the 30 Universal monster movies can kind of be divided into two different categories in how they're racist. The first category, and the one that most of the films fall into, are we're just not even going to have non-white people in this movie. And then the second category, which probably about 3 to 5 films fall into this, is we're going to have ethnic characters, but they're going to be a stereotype.
Yeah.
The most prevalent examples of this are Son of Dracula and The Mummy's Curse. In Son of Dracula, it takes place in like Louisiana, in this mansion. There's like an old plantation, which is very important to the plot, and there are all these African American workers. And it was made in the 40s, so like the civil rights movement hadn't happened yet. So all like the black workers are like, we're happy to be serving you, and master, and like all that stuff. And then The Mummy's Curse features one specific black character who isn't really developed that much. I don't even know his name, but he stands out to me because he calls a lot of white people master, and it's the 40s, and he's like, yes, Master Joe, yes, Master this, and yes, Master that, and I'm like, dude, they don't own you.
Yeah.
So it's a little weird in that.
So with all of that said, you talk about racism seen now in movies. Would you say that the horror movies that have depicted racism had played a role in what we see now on TV?
TV?
Do you think there's a connection in horror movies now to the horror movies of that time and racism? Do you see a connection? Because there still is sexism, racism. You still see the homosexuality in these movies. Do you think, again, that set the bar, that set the standard? I think you said it reinforced it.
Yeah, I don't think it set the standard, but I think, because that was the mindset of the era.
Okay.
So having those films fall into that mindset and having be so influential for future filmmakers, and like it kind of just, they are not questioning the racism or sexism in the film, and so then they don't question it when they're making their own movie.
So what, and this is somewhat of an easy question, somewhat of a difficult question. What makes a horror movie scary? What makes it horrible? What is it about it?
Well, depending on the horror film, bad production values, but
Definitely.
I think it's just tapping into primal human fears. A lot of these Universal monster movies play on a sense of dread and a sense of helplessness and a sense of discrimination, even, especially with the Frankenstein monster. The Frankenstein monster, at his best, is not a monster. He only kills in self-defense, and in one case, manslaughter. Like, he didn't intend to kill this one person, and everyone just rejects him based on what he is, not what he's done. And so that kind of plays into the human fear of being rejected from society, just for who you are, not for anything you do.
What is the one thing that you want to have the viewer go home and think about when watching that next scary movie? The one they're going to go to the theater and watch Halloween night and say, this movie is blank. What should they go into the movie thinking?
That's a good question. I think they should probably go in thinking...
Should they have a preconceived notion, or should they go in with a blank mindset?
I never think you should have a preconceived notion going into any movie. I think they're more enjoyable if you go in blank. Gotcha. And so I think they should go in thinking, what is the subtext behind this? Or is this kind of just buying into a sense of privilege, or is it like unconsciously discriminatory, stuff like that? Does that make sense?
Yes, it's more than just a scary movie. It's behind what makes it scary.
Yeah.
And also, you just mentioned to us, it's more than just a scary movie getting you scared. You said you're easy scared, by the way.
Yes.
So how did you...
I want to make sure no one's going to jump out.
I don't think so. Wait, no, I'm kidding. I don't understand how you know so much about scary films, but you're an easy scare. What got you into this? What was the development process?
Well, I don't know that much about modern horror films
Okay.
because I'm an easy scare.
That makes it even more exciting and different, I think.
The older monster movies are not like jump out scary to me. because you couldn't be at the time. You couldn't depict grotesque violence or just really violent things. It plays more on darkness and subtle fear and tragedy, really. So those old monster movies, to me, are more about macabre elements and that kind of darkness than fear. So that really draws me to them, because I do like macabre and spooky things. I just don't like being scared.
Yes.
I'm just...
We won't scare you, I promise. Yeah. Maybe when this goes off, we might do something. I'm not sure. Thank you so much, Jacob, for being here. We appreciate it. And that is the 30 After. We appreciate it. Don't forget to watch the 30, which is also going to be on our YouTube page. Happy Halloween, folks. So long. Until next time.